this on the computer. All right. Well, welcome everybody to our September 2021 Taco Tuesday. Tonight, we're going to be kind of celebrating back to school and talking about IEP meetings and how we can really give parents the power to be engaged. So empowerment and engagement at your child's IEP meeting. My name is Diet Snyder, and I am the Associate Director of Birth to 5 Services at the Washington State School for the Blind. And I'm going to introduce Krista Bolger.
Hi, I'm Krista. I am a parent of 2 children with retinal dystrophy, and I'm also a teacher, an outreach teacher at WSSB.
Great. So I am going to share my screen and our PowerPoint just of information. This is just going to be, okay. We can see that. Great.
There we go.
We're just going to kind of give you some basic information about how we can empower parents to be engaged at these meetings, because it's really your meeting, because it's your child. Right. I'm trying to move there we go. But before we do that, let's just take a look at those 6 principles of IDEA that Jerry Clark from Washington PAVE first introduced to us. And we have another parent that's joining us, so this is great. Hi, Henry, we just started, so I'm going to keep going.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome, you guys. So we're going to just kind of briefly discuss the first 6 principles of IDEA that Jerry Clark from Washington PAVE first introduced to us, because it's kind of pertinent to what we're talking about tonight. So remember, IDEA stands for the Individuals with Disability Education Act, and it is the federal law that your child who is in special education, that's the guidance that school districts are given, and it's federal law. And the first thing is free and appropriate public education, which is also known as FAPE, F-A-P-E. And that basically means that your child has the right to a free education that's appropriate and at the same level as their non-disabled peers. Also, your child has a right to non-discriminatory evaluation. That's a really important thing, and especially for children who are blind or have low vision, that evaluation needs to meet their needs, which means visual access or tactile access or whatever access. So it can't be a visual test, for instance. And then your child has a right to an individual education program or plan. And that is basically a contract in some ways, that how your child is going to get their education, accommodations, modification, how FAPE will be offered to your child and supported in the school. And then least restrictive environment is really important. So every child with a disability has the right to be educated with their non-disabled peers. So in the general education realm. And so there's a range of services or placements. And remember, we learned from Jerry that special education is a service, not a place. And so least restrictive environment is really important, because those modifications and accommodations need to be written in to the plan so that your child can be with their non-disabled peers as much as possible, as much as what's appropriate. And then also parent and student participation. This isn't something that is just told to you about what's going to happen. You're an actual active participant. And that's what we're really going to talk about tonight, is how parents can be that active participant. And I don't want to say take the power back, but take the power back. Like, this is your child. And then we're also going to talk about procedural safeguards and what your family rights are, because everybody has a right to know what their rights are. So that's just kind of like those 6 principles that I know that we've talked about before. So let's talk about rights. And Krista thought that this slide was funny when I said rights. I have rights about my child's education. Yes, you do.
Yes.
And you basically have we're telling you about 2 different sets of rights. And one set is called procedural safeguards. And though that's that packet of rights or of information that they always give you at that IEP meeting or at any change. And I had my notes here. Where did I do with my notes? Oh, crap. Oh, here they are. Sorry. So basically the procedural safeguards, and at the end of this presentation, I'm going to make sure that you guys all get this PowerPoint. The procedural safeguards are kind of 3 basic areas. 1, parent consent. So they can't do anything without your consent for a variety of different things. So it's parent consent, kind of overall parent consent. Prior written notice is basically they're letting you know in writing what they're proposing before they actually do it. And then you have to consent for evaluations and reevaluations. And so parent consent is a big deal. And then also confidentiality and how you have access to your child's school records. You have the right for your school records to be held confidential. Like, this isn't just information that everybody gets, and not everybody in the school gets your child's information, and especially diagnosis or disability category, for instance, that's held very, very confidential. And then what are your rights regarding the retention or destruction of those records? Say, for instance, if you move to a different school district, or when your child graduates out of school, what happens to those records? So those procedural safeguards kind of write that all out. And then the last but not least is the resolution process. So if you have a conflict or you're not happy with something that's happening, what is the process of getting those conflicts solved? So there's mediation that always happens first. Then there's something called a due process hearing, and that's kind of spelled out, but it's just a process. And then there's also another form of resolution called a citizen complaint. So not only can parents make a complaint about not being happy about what's happening, but also anybody can make a complaint about your child's rights being violated. And so that's kind of an interesting thing. And then and I gave you the website about where those rights are located on our OSPI website. And OSPI stands for the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. So kind of like our Department of Education at Washington State. But then there's also a really great document called the Bill of Rights for Students who are blind or low vision and their families. And that was written, I think, 2 years ago by the Council of Schools for the Blind. And I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment, and I'm not going to actually pull that up. I'm going to actually pull that up on, well, can you pull it up, Krista?
I can sure try. It's a great document.
Oh, crap.
Oh, hold on.
I lost everybody here. Hold on.
Get us back.
Get us back. Where are you? There you are.
Does anyone have any questions?
Huh?
Anyone have any questions so far
Yeah,
about the
questions so
information you've
far
given?
about that. Have you guys gotten that? The procedural safeguards? Have you looked at it?
Okay. Oh, all righty. I haven't. Oh, grabbing a copy. There we go. All right. Pulling up. I'm going to, okay,
Go
I'll
ahead and
share my
share.
screen. Awesome.
Oh, you haven't yet. Mhm.
No, I haven't. There. Do you see it?
Yeah, procedural safeguards.
No, do you see the Bill of Rights?
Yeah, I see it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this is the Bill of Rights, and basically it falls, within IDEA, and it's basically telling you what your rights are as a parent of a child who has a visual impairment. This is really wordy. And it's very technical in language. And so I have given you a website to Emily Coleman, who was actually used to be our outreach director here at Washington, at Washington State School for the Blind, but is now the superintendent of the Texas School for the Blind. And she's actually a parent of a child named Eddie, who is blind. And so she wrote a really great article about this and changed it into parent language. And it's on the Family Connect website. And so I've included that in our PowerPoint.
Awesome.
Actually, Krista, take that off and I'm going to share our PowerPoint, and I think I can get to that website off of our PowerPoint.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to share, because I just want to show you that. And here it is, Eddie's mom's version of the Bill of Rights. Okay, can you see that, Krista, the website?
I do not see
Okay,
the website.
let me reshare again. We are learning about this, you guys.
Oh,
My version of the, here we go.
there we go.
Now you can see it. So this is Family Connect. Family Connect actually is a really great website. They've got a lot of really great information connecting parents to parents. And so this is a picture of Eddie in the red shirt, and he is reading Braille with his teacher. And here is Emily's version of the Bill of Rights. And so here's her statements in her own interpretation. My child deserves easy access to right professionals expecting his success. My child deserves an education based on his specific needs. I deserve accurate information to make the best choice for my son and access to professionals and organizations that help. My child with visual impairment deserves Braille instruction. I deserve to know the unique skills needed for my son who is blind. My child deserves additional blindness specific instruction outside of standard coursework. And that's actually called expanded core curriculum, which we kind of talked about in a previous Taco Tuesday. My child deserves all the same information as his peers in whatever way he needs it. This is important. Access to educational materials is really, really important.
One thing I would add to that would be at the same time.
At the same time. Yes. Thank you, Krista. I deserve to know about all school settings to have a voice in placement decision. And we're going to kind of talk a little bit about that when Krista talks about different strategies at an IEP meeting. My child deserves educators that will prepare him for the future. We're going to kind of talk about that too. And my son deserves to be a kid first and be like all kids and adds value to our lives and the lives of others. I love Emily's interpretation of these rights. So I've gave you the site for this so that you can go and read that yourself. Let me continue sharing our PowerPoint here. Learning to share and not share. Okay.
And that could be a document that is that you print up and share with your child's team as well.
I love that. Yeah, I agree. I agree. From current slide. So do you guys does anybody have any questions about those parent rights or procedural safeguards?
I see. Thanks. Hi, Henry.
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
We're just eating dinner, so I had the video out there.
Yeah.
Let's see. That'll work. Anyway, question. A lot of those seem like part of education for all kids, and
Absolutely.
and it's really helpful to have the extra ones specific to blindness.
Yeah.
Is there such a thing in general for education? I don't remember coming across that in my teacher training. Like to use to say, this is a starting point. Hey, you this is familiar at least because such a thing exists already. And let's just add a couple of things because that makes sense for my child's needs.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I think it's assumed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but for children with special needs, it's because if you really study the history of special education and the reasons for special education, children with disabilities were not included in general education. And so that's why IDEA was written and has been a very powerful voice for children with special needs to make sure that they are included in education, and that every child has the right to be educated, and every child has the right to be educated with everybody the same.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So it's sad that our children with special needs has to have it spelled out when it should just be obvious and already assumed, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's why these what the service you're providing to us is really important. So that I didn't know about all this. It was, I was trained as a teacher in Minnesota, so maybe things are a little bit different there, but yeah, we're late to the game as a society.
You're learning it. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's great.
So thanks. Awesome. Yeah, thanks. I'll keep watching here.
Okay. So let's so take it away, Krista, on setting the stage and what this IEP and what parents can do.
Right. I really like this choice of words you have here, setting the stage, because it can often feel like as a parent that you're on stage or there's a spotlight on you when you're at an IEP meeting, maybe sitting at a table surrounded by 5, 10 other service providers and educators that work with your child. And that really can cause, that can be really overwhelming as a parent who these are professionals who have went to school to learn how to work in this specific area of need that your child has, and just naturally, because we're human, we're sitting around a table and having all of these different people talk to you about your child, and it just kind of sets you up for going into the meeting that maybe very nervous, I'm sure, and as I have been, and just not sure at all of what you're about to encounter. And so it's important for you to remember that although you are not perhaps a professional in the education field, you are still, and even more so, an important and equally an equally important contributor to this IEP. This is your child. Nobody knows your child better than you, and any information that you have to share about your child and what happens at home is vital to the team. Is important that the team knows a lot of this information, because so often we see what a student is like in the classroom, during the day, and might not have that connection with what happens after school hours. And so we want, a lot of times, I'm switching hats here. Sorry, I get confused sometimes as the parent and then as a provider. So let me put my parent hat back on. So it's important for us to tell our child's teachers whatever we think is important, that we want for them to know. Our child is a student to them, but is just, the apple of our eye, and we want them to know what makes them tick, what upsets them. It has always amazed me when I have offered up what I had thought in the past was, too much information, and had members of the team come back and say, thank you so much for sharing that with us, because now this makes sense, and now we understand why this happens. And there is no such thing as too much information when it comes to you educating your child's educators, and just the intricacies of your child that often may go misunderstood, because perhaps the child is nonverbal, right? So there's so many factors there. Yes, Henry, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, no, just to add from the teacher side, I found it really helpful when parents were there and telling me about during an IEP meeting, they give me a context for all the things that I saw there. It was part of a story. It was a lot easier for me to remember to implement those things that were described in the IEP, because I saw it from their perspective a little bit better, and was able to bring that into the classroom. Right.
It's just that those pieces of information, that incidental stuff, that really helps you kind of encapsulate this child as more than just a student in a class, right? And so with that in mind, and knowing that as parents, we are an equal and important contributor to this IEP, you also want to share your information about your child, like what I was just discussing. And a part of that IEP is the considerations page. And thank you for moving forward to that, yet. A part of, I'm sorry, not the considerations page, but the consideration section of the IEP. And I just want to read specifically in that section of the IEP, it states the strengths of the student and the concerns of the parents for enhancing the education of their child. So you might have been asked by a case manager prior to an IEP meeting for any input you might have about your child's strengths and weaknesses. And perhaps not all parents respond to this question. Sometimes I think it's because the question wasn't posed to them in a way that they understood that this is their opportunity to have their voice, their words made part of this official document, for their child. And so this is the part of the IEP that you can write up whatever you might have to say in response to that question, and ask that it be put in the consideration section of your child's IEP. And I have seen very long sections here in this box. I have seen short, because the parent it might say something simple, such as the parent does not have any concerns at this time. And I really, as a provider, I don't really like to see that, because I'm pretty sure that every parent has something to provide that's a little more in depth than maybe no concerns. But I really try and encourage the parents of my students to contribute to that piece of the IEP. It's their voice. And what we have here on the screen is an example of, what are we calling this yet?
I
It's
kind of call this I don't know what I call this.
it's
A one-page picture.
all about me
All
type
about
of
me. Yeah.
right.
But
And I go
I
ahead.
love the vision statement. Talk about the vision statement.
Right. So this vision statement, you can see this is an example that we obtained from an online source. I think was it Te Texas? I think it was TSBBI. I'm not sure. Then and you can see that there's a picture here of this little girl, and the vision statement. It says. Now, this is from the point of view of the parents, and they state here, we envision our daughter living a life of choice. We envision her being included in every aspect of life, including at school. In the future, we envision her living a happy life surrounded by love and support. And you see here, this is the parents' statement that they I can tell just by this document they created, they are involved. They want everyone to understand. You can see here strengths, what works for me, what doesn't work for me, and then also what I'm working on. And you can see it's just a really brief identification of her IEP goals and vision statements. We are sending you a link at the end of this PowerPoint that Diet created. And there is an example of how to go through and create a vision statement for your child. And a vision statement for a young child will more than likely be relatively short, right? Of course, we want our youngest children to be loved. We want them to be able to explore and be with their peers and experience the same opportunities that their peers are experiencing. And then as our children are growing and we're learning about their strengths, the areas that we really want them to that they'll be blossoming in and be able to, and those areas also that they need to strengthen. There's just so many things that you can do with this statement, and I've done it. We've moved across country and across state several times when my oldest was young, and I created a similar version of this. It wasn't a snazzy, but I did create a similar version of this, and I called it All About My Son's Name. And it was everything that I wanted them to know without taking up too much time, face to face, just a document they could have to look at when they had the time to do so. Mm-hmm. So this is one example, and I know we have another one here, and this would be perhaps without a picture. And again, very brightly colored, and I love how this to me seems maybe perhaps for a younger child, what my family loves about me, my favorite things, how I learn best, things I need help with, best ways to support me, and to have a child of age who could help contribute. What a fantastic document to have for them to assist with creating about these statements about themselves. And that actually is when students are older, a lot of TVIs do kind of flip the switch and have their students, their blind and low vision students, creating these types of documents for themselves to present to their teachers, middle school, high school. So another important piece of that is making sure of the IEP meeting, is to make sure you know everyone who's present, their name, their role. Again, there might be a lot of people at the table, and typically everybody goes around and introduces themselves, but I guarantee you there might be people at the table that you've never met, right? And that's just typically how it goes. So it's important for you to know who's there, and that is something that will print out on an IEP document. Of course, everybody who attended that meeting will sign that they were in attendance. But it's important for you to kind of know who you're talking to while you're there, and you have them at the table with you. So you can ask those questions that perhaps you've had but haven't had a chance to reach out to them or things change throughout the school year, right? So it's just a great time to be face to face with people. And I also want to say before we switch gears here is with COVID, most people have attended their IEPs virtually, and I understand that a lot of them are still taking place virtually. And I don't know. It's just I like when it comes to an IEP meeting, I really appreciate being face to face with those who are working with my students, and so I look forward to I really look forward to my first in-person IEP meeting this fall. And so it's important as parents for us to catch up that way in terms of what our I don't know, there's been a disconnect, right? Do you over the last while, and not to say that educational teams haven't gone above and beyond to try and make up for that, but I am definitely looking forward to returning to one-on-one and seeing the faces of the teachers that work with my children again. So, Henry, did you have anything to add to that? The Noun Project. Oh, yes.
I'm just, the Noun Project for, I like the colored boxes, and thought,
yes,
just putting myself in the participant in IEP meetings after a long day, anything to like, to help me focus.
Right.
Colored box.
Oh,
Yep.
that's right. That's right. Oh, and I can't forget, we have added here muffins or cookies. Sure, bring them. It's so true. Right. And
well, food always has a way of making people feel welcome and connected, and a common goal through the breaking of bread together. I don't know. I just think that food is sometimes, it's probably a complete cultural thing, but I know that it can just kind of sometimes connect people.
It can be a very practical thing too. You're helping meet, it's a basic need, right? So if you feel that needs met, then you can then think of other people's needs easier.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
So as a tactical thing, it makes a lot of sense to bring something that people can snack on.
Yeah,
I like that
At least,
term.
if not kind as well.
Grandma's favorite chocolate chip cookie recipe that your child might really love. I mean, so it could be connected to their favorite snack. I don't know. There's lots of different ways you can bring in food, but
that makes sense. You could tie it again to something, a way to get to know the child. Say, and this is from a recipe that Helen likes to make with her grandma when she visits.
Exactly.
Oh, right. So, setting the stage, so many ways to be prepared.
We wanted to share some of these ways of sharing information. So often parents go to IEP meetings because the team has now information to share with them. So it's the parent getting this information, but parents have information to share with these teachers as well. And so to make it a two-way street, again, you're an equal participant in this meeting. So you sharing your information can just add to it, because again, you know your child best. And so there's a variety of different ways that you can do this. And this is just one example of that.
And I love it. I don't know though, with the picture, I don't know if I'm being overly cautious, but if that would be considered,
well, again,
not as acceptable as, but if it's from the parent and
it's from the parent, and it's
So the picture thing feels like that's a way to further humanize. You're talking about a person,
right?
I agree.
And it does. It feels weird to me. It feels like putting a picture on a resume or a job application. I want it to be based on whatever the qualifications are, and my picture is not a qualification. It shouldn't be.
Right.
For most jobs, whatever.
Well, sometimes providers are coming to an IEP meeting and they're going to be working with your child, but they've never met your child yet. And so I think that picture, again, further introduces your child to this new person who's going to be a pretty important person in their life as a teacher
Right.
or a therapist.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate, the what doesn't work section. That's just as important as what works for me, right? It really is, because if you have with Ellie here, it says hovering, don't hover. Let me try first. I don't like being, oh, I thought it said route. It says rushed. I don't like being rushed. So things that those are little things that could cause some, perhaps some major outbursts, right? And so just knowing these types of things about her is only helpful for the teacher in terms of the words they use, the tone they use.
Absolutely, because it might take them a whole half a year to figure that out. But if
Right.
the parent already knows that, and so if they can share that information, that's going to make a huge difference.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, this is just a template. You guys, you can do whatever. So we have some reflective discussion questions. So if you've had an IEP meeting, would you do anything different? How did it go? And if you haven't had an IEP yet, are there things that you might want to try to help this meeting go a little bit more effectively for you? What are your thoughts?
I'm happy to talk. I see Perrin is also with us. If they want
Parents
to chime
here,
in.
yeah.
I've just been through one as a parent that for Helen before she went to preschool last year. And I attended remotely, and Beth was there with Helen because I think they just said bring one parent and child. And I was okay with that because then I felt a little more free to look at my notes and talk remotely. That was okay. And
Right.
don't know, I'm fairly comfortable meeting people I've never met before and talking to them openly. So that wasn't too much of a challenge. And it would have felt more complete to have been there in person. And because the two groups, for a while, there were two separate groups, as like the speech therapist and occupational therapist were with Helen and Beth in one room. And then some people peeled off to talk with me, and it felt disconnected.
Oh.
This may not have been, I think it was the IEP meeting. So my memory is a little foggy. If that sounds like that would never happen in an IEP, maybe I'm wrong. But
Sounds like maybe that was an evaluation meeting.
oh, that makes more sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I agree with you. A lot of school districts now are doing IEP meetings virtual, which makes a lot of sense. You're sitting around a table, you can easily do that, but at the same time, there is that, you don't have that physical connection with people being in the same room. So yes, there's pros and cons.
Yes.
I think the IEP meeting was then at the end of a Step Ahead Pierce County team. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm.
They had the coordinator, Helen's weekly teacher, like the main person that she saw, then vision and physical therapy. And there were just some odd questions where Beth and I are like, we don't feel comfortable making that judgment, like comparing her to other people. I don't know other 3-year-olds really. I know her cousin, but
Okay.
So that was in a little bit uncomfortable part, and it was okay trusting, because we trusted the team, the Step Ahead team,
Okay.
with the 3, to just put something down that makes sense to you, and we'll go with that.
Okay.
That was a little odd for us, but we're ready for the next one, whenever that is.
Right. Well, IEP meetings happen every year.
Mhm.
And then in 3 years, every 3 years, a child is reevaluated to see if they continue to be eligible for special education services.
Right.
So that happens every 3 years.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, great. Okay, so I'm gonna
Perrin.
go this way.
Hi, Perrin.
Hi. I think for our IEP meeting, what I liked most was hearing from the teachers and the O&M and TVI's perspective, what Addie's strengths were, and also hearing what the next steps were on what her next goals would be for orientation, mobility, and Braille.
Mhm.
Since, I didn't know a lot about how a child learns Braille or how a child learns to use a cane, as far as, they do this and they do this and they do this. So that I liked that part of it. I think going into the next one, I'm going to take a copy of that Bill of Rights with me and that
Okay.
FAPE stuff, because, there were some things that I think I've talked about in the past where it's like, I wish I would have stuck with my gun and insisted that Addie have certain services. And so it would be helpful to have those rights in front of me, so I know when to stand my ground and insist on certain things, like, having her own personal book during circle time.
Yes. Yes. Well, I'm glad that's going to be helpful for you.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's the whole point.
Yeah, because, you assume that everyone on the IEP team has her best interest at heart, and I'm sure they do, but sometimes they don't want to do certain things, even though by law,
Right.
the parents can insist on that. So,
Mhm.
And you should. And yeah, because again, Jerry, remember when Jerry really talked to us about that you are your child's advocate. And
Mhm.
the whole reason that Krista and I are doing these family resource nights are to help you guys learn how to be those advocates, and to support you in that endeavor, because you're the parent and we can help you. So
yeah, and that's why these discussions are so helpful as a parent too, because everything other than this meeting is what we hear from their teachers. And
Right.
so if their teachers don't explicitly tell us that we have the right to insist on something that a teacher doesn't want to do,
Mhm.
then we'd never know that. So,
right. Yeah.
And it's important to recognize as a parent as well that your child, if they are in the classroom with a special education teacher, that's a very broad title. So there are special education teachers that may have not ever had a child who is blind or low vision in their class. And so, not to say they don't know anything about that, but it's still important for your TVI to really connect with not just the teacher, but the special area teachers, and making sure that everybody understands any accommodations that your child might need to be able to participate equally along with his or her peers. So that's where I almost feel like, I only know vision loss, but we, as parents of students with who are blind or visually impaired, we have to kind of, I feel like I have to advocate a little bit more because it is such a low incidence disability. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've run into that too. A lot of these teachers have never had a visually impaired student in their class. It just doesn't happen so often. So
right.
They just don't know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So through no fault of their own, right? But
right.
It's just they haven't had the opportunity to teach.
Yep.
So
yeah, so I'm going to send you guys a PDF of this PowerPoint so that you have these websites, but here they are listed. We got 2 from Washington PAVE, and one is all about that old IEP process, which was actually a very great article. And then the Early Learning Toolkit kind of really sums up it in a real general way as well. Krista talked about the student vision statement that came from a website called A Day in Our Shoes, and how to write a vision statement for your child and your family. And obviously your children are very young now, but maybe when your child gets a little bit older, they can write their own vision statement. What do I want to be when I grow up is a great start to a vision statement, for instance. Or maybe what college do I want to go to when I get older and why? And so vision statements can change. And so this is a really great website that kind of talks about that. And then the Bill of Rights for Students from COSB, Council of Schools for the Blind. And then Eddie's mom's version of the Bill of Rights from Family Connect. And then I've also included the Washington OSPI procedural safeguards. I like this document only because it goes into much more detail about them and also that whole resolution process. God forbid that you ever get to the point where you need that information, but it is there for you. And I think that that's important to know. So that's what we have for that. And then we've kind of talked a little bit about future Taco Tuesdays, and this is Krista and I's kind of plan. October is White Cane Awareness Month. So we kind of want to revisit O&M, orientation and mobility, and specifically talk about the white cane, but also alternatives to the white cane that might be appropriate for your little one. And then also November, since Thanksgiving is in November, which is my favorite holiday, and Thanksgiving to me is all about food. And so food and eating and sensory play, and maybe, different aspects of eating. When a child can't see the food in front of them, sometimes there are some impacts to that when vision is lost. And I have a friend from Colorado who I might have come and do a guest speaking, who's done a lot of work with eating and sensory play with children who are blind or have low vision. And then December, let's talk about gift ideas and dealing with holiday stress, not just stress for adults, because we all have stress in the holidays, but children also have stress in the holidays. So how can we help our children with the stress of these new traditions that only happen once a year, that sometimes can really change our daily routines, that can cause stress with kids? And then in January, we're thinking that January is Braille Literacy Awareness Month. So maybe we could learn a little bit about Braille. And Perrin, it sounds like since Addie is learning Braille, you could learn Braille too. So we're thinking that in January, we could get more in depth about Braille. So what do you guys think about those topics for the next couple of months?
They sound great, especially the gift ideas.
Okay.
They all sound good, but the gift ideas one, I'm definitely looking forward to.
Okay.
Well, it's on the 14th, so you'll have 9 days to obtain whatever.
Yeah.
I was telling Diet, I said, if maybe we should do it in November because it's right before, it's before Black Friday, but I get it.
Maybe we can pepper it in to every Taco Tuesday and just have some different toy ideas. Maybe we could do that. That's a thought.
Because I've been there, done that. I know it can get kind of stressful as a parent. Like I want a really impactful toy, something that isn't just loud and noisy, right? And
Yeah.
plastic. So,
Okay, I'll start exploring some of my favorite toys and some different gift ideas,
Right.
but definitely there's a lot of great resources and ideas out there
right.
regarding that.
We can start a Christmas list.
We could start
Christmas
a
wish
Christmas
list.
Okay, let's talk about that. Great.
Right.
All right, you guys. Well, I'm going to stop recording, but thanks for coming, and I will be emailing everybody that, and then I'm also going to email everybody the DDA PowerPoint from was that August?
Yeah.
I don't remember. Yeah,
Mhm.
but I'll make sure that everybody gets that.